What if I told you we could teach an AI to think, to reason, and to tackle really complex problems without ever showing it a single word of human language?
It sounds kind of out there, right?
Well, today we're diving into a radical new idea that could completely change how we build AI. For years, the assumption has been pretty simple. To get a powerful AI, you need to feed it text. All the books, all the articles, basically the entire internet. But what if that's not the only way? Is language really the only path to intelligence, or is it just one signal among many? And yeah, what if the real answer doesn't look like a library at all, but, well, like this, a chaotic, kind of mesmerizing, evolving grid of digital patterns? These weird-looking images are actually at the very heart of this new approach, and they might just hold the key to a future of AI that goes way beyond text. So, you might be asking, why even look for another way? I mean, the current method works pretty well, right? Well, it all comes down to a crisis that's looming over the entire field of AI. We're about to hit a wall. The thing is, the appetite for AI training data is just skyrocketing. But the amount of high-quality text that we humans have produced, that's finite. Some projections are even suggesting we could run out of useful text from the internet as soon as 2028. We are staring down the barrel of a data cliff. And it's not just about the quantity. Let's be real, web text is messy. It's filled with our biases, it's noisy, and it takes a ton of work to clean up. But here's the real kicker. It mixes up raw facts, like what a cat is, with the underlying process of reasoning. That actually makes it harder for an AI to learn the fundamental building blocks of computation itself. Okay, so faced with this big data problem, researchers got creative. They turned to a totally different source. Not data that you collect, but data that you generate. A kind of synthetic digital life. They used this thing called neural cellular automata, or NCAs. The best way to think about it is like a digital lava lamp. You've got a grid of cells, and each cell decides what color it's going to be next based on the cells around it. But here's the twist. The rules for that decision are actually a tiny neural network, and every time you run a simulation, you get a new random set of rules. This creates a literally infinite universe of these evolving patterns. And just look at the variety you can get. On the left, a simple rule creates this very orderly, predictable pattern. But on the right, a slightly different rule creates total chaos. This ability to tune the complexity of the data turns out to be incredibly important. So the researchers cooked up this wild experiment. What happens if you show an AI this abstract, pattern-filled data before you ever show it a single word of English? Let's just say the results were not what anybody expected. They used this new 3-stage process. And the key is that very first step, pre-training. They took a standard language model and, from the very beginning, only trained it to do one thing: predict the next little patch of pixels in these NCA simulations. The goal wasn't to learn words. It was to figure out the hidden rules of these little digital universes. This diagram here shows the flow perfectly. First, the model learns from these weird, evolving grids. Only then does it get trained on normal stuff like web text, code, and math. So the big question is, does this abstract warm-up actually help? To find out, they started with 164 million tokens of this synthetic NCA data. Now, that might sound like a lot, but in the grand scheme of AI training, it's really not that much. Let's call this our David. And here comes Goliath. They compared its performance against a model that was pre-trained on 1.6 billion tokens of natural language from the web. That's 10 times more data. You'd think more real-world language data would always be better. I mean, it's a no-brainer, right? Wrong. The result was absolutely stunning. This chart shows what happened. The model that got the small dose of NCA data actually performed better at language tasks than the one trained on 10 times more natural language. On this chart, lower is better, and the NCA model is clearly in the lead. It learned faster and just got a better result in the end. Even the researchers themselves were blown away. They put it right there in the paper. Their synthetic data approach beat the natural language one, even when the language model had a massive advantage in data and computer power. So, what on earth is going on here? How can these abstract, totally meaningless patterns be a better teacher for language than, well, language itself? The answer, it turns out, is in what the model is actually learning under the hood. The first huge clue came from this analysis right here. When they peeked inside the ATA model to see which parts got the biggest boost from the NCA training, one component just lit up: the attention layers. You can think of those as the part of the AI's brain that tracks long-range patterns and dependencies, a really fundamental computational skill. And that gets us to the heart of it. This NCA data has no meaning. It's a pure, clean signal for learning the structure of computation itself. Each sequence is like a little puzzle. It forces the model to figure out a hidden rule and then apply it again and again. It's a pure workout for the model's pattern-matching muscles, without all the messy distractions of words and their complicated meanings. But the second insight is even cooler. The researchers found they could actually tune the synthetic data for specific jobs. For example, programming code, which is super structured, got the biggest boost from the simpler, more predictable NCA patterns. But for messy web text and math problems, those benefited from the more complex, chaotic data. It's like they're designing the perfect key for a specific lock. This proves the model isn't just learning randomness, it's learning to recognize different kinds of structure. So where does all this leave us? I mean, this isn't just some clever lab experiment. This really points toward a fundamentally new way of thinking about and building artificial intelligence. This just opens up a whole new horizon. Instead of just scraping the internet and hoping for the best, we can go from collecting messy data to intentionally designing clean, super efficient training data. And what does that mean in practice? It could mean smaller, more powerful, and way more efficient models. It means we could create highly specialized AIs perfectly tuned for things like scientific discovery by feeding them custom-designed data. We can build the foundations of reasoning first and then teach it language on top. It's a total paradigm shift. And this all brings us to one final, kind of mind-bending thought. For so long, we've basically tied our whole concept of intelligence to the tool of human language. We figured you couldn't really have one without the other. But what this research suggests is that the core of reasoning might be something way more abstract, a universal language of patterns and structure that's totally independent of us. And that leaves us with a really big question. If an AI can learn the fundamentals of logic without our words, what else can it ultimately learn without our help?